Hey, friends, it's Mark from the Where to Gaze Retire podcast. I want to tell you that I built something close to my heart, LGBTQseniors.com. It's a free, welcoming online community for LGBTQ seniors. We've got forums, private messaging, real conversations, and monthly Zoom meetups where members from around the world connect, laugh, and feel a little less alone. No algorithms, no noise, just real people, real talk, and real community, all completely free. If you've ever thought, I wish there were a space like this, well, now there is. And if you enjoy what I bring to the table, I hope you'll find it in your heart to buy me a coffee or even a few to help keep this community going strong. So please visit lgbtqseniors.com today because connection matters and pride doesn't retire. Thank you.
Welcome to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast, where we help you in the LGBTQ plus community find a safe and affordable retirement place. Join Mark Goldstein as he interviews others who live in gay-friendly places around the globe. Learn about the climate, cost of living, healthcare, crime and safety, and more. Now, here's your host, Mark Goldstein.
Have you ever wondered what it's like to retire in Vigo, Spain? Today's guest is Daniel Louis Loboto, a 62-year-old originally from Denver, Colorado. After coming out later in life, having previously been married and raising children, Daniel set out to redefine home and community. He eventually found both in Boston, where his chosen family blossomed and supported his journey. Though not yet retired, Daniel is currently living in Spain under a digital nomad visa and plans to transition to a non-lucrative visa once retirement officially begins. Why Spain? For Daniel, the answer is simple: economics, culture, and connection. With a retirement income that stretches further than it would in Boston, a deep appreciation for Spanish life, and ancestral roots in Galicia, Daniel is embracing a new chapter abroad with purpose and pride. Welcome to the podcast, Daniel. Thank you so much for coming. And let's hear your story. So you say economics, culture, and connection. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, economics, I realized upon visits to Spain and discovering the Spanish culture that number one, the prices here are much lower for many aspects of life. Not everything, but the overall cost of living here I've noticed is much more affordable than many other places to consider retiring. Culture-wise, my family has Spanish heritage from way back when. You know, immediate grandparents and great grandparents were all born in the United States, but there is this ancestral link. Their first language has been Spanish. I grew up listening to Spanish being spoken in the home, familiar with many of the cultural aspects as well. So it just led to okay, I know the culture, the finances are good. Let's explore some more. And the community here has been wonderful.
Great. Okay, let's dive in. Let's talk about climate and geography. Where exactly is Vigo? A lot of our listeners and YouTube members have not heard of Vigo, Spain. So you always hear of the Madrid, the Malaga, the Valencia, but Vigo, where is Vigo located?
So Vigo is actually in the northwest corner of Spain, pretty much opposite from Barcelona. Barcelona is in the southeast corner of Spain, and Spain is the square geography anyway. But northwestern shore of Spain on the Atlantic coast, it is not on the Mediterranean coast. Vigo is the largest city in Pontevedra. Pontevedra is one of the provinces in Galicia. Galicia is one of the major geographical areas in Spain. And Vigo is a good sized city. It's about 300,000 people. in the city itself. And then the metropolitan area is about 500,000. So it is a good sized port city.
So, okay, so it's northwest, so it's a little chilly, correct?
Yep, it's not as warm as the Mediterranean, and that was one of the draws. The summers here are very mild. Typically, the high temperatures are in the 70s. They do get into the 80s and very rarely into the 90s. The evenings are cool. The winters here are not as harsh as when where I came from in Boston. Boston, you still get very cold winters and snow. And here in the wintertime, it rarely drops below freezing, if at all. Normally, the temperatures during the day are in the 40s, and in the nighttime, it gets into the high 30s and low 40s typically. And the only other downside to the winter here is lots and lots of rain.
So I picture it very lush and green.
Yes, it is its own little Irish corner of Spain. There is a lot of Irish culture here, Gaelic culture. In fact, the soccer team from Vigo is called the Celts because of the interlace of culture with the northern neighbors, so to speak. We're
So you're
also
from,
located about 20 miles north of the Portuguese border, and we're about 100 miles north of Porto, one of the major cities in northern Portugal.
that's what I was just going to ask as well. So you can very well do a day trip to Portugal, to Porto.
Yes, a day trip to Porto, there is train service and bus service. It's, a couple hours of travel time. It is not the high-speed train yet. I noticed in today's paper, yes, they still read a lot of newspapers here, but in today's paper, the major article was about proposal for high-speed train service between Vigo and Porto.
That'd be great. That would be great. Okay, so what would you say the average temperature in the summer is? We know the winter doesn't get as down to freezing. Maybe it does get down to freezing, but nothing really incredibly lower than that. But how about the summers?
So the average temperature in July and August for high is usually the high 70s. That's not to say that we won't experience a day in the 80s, but the extreme heat of the Mediterranean that they see in, Valencia, Barcelona, Malaga, Seville, the 105 degrees during the day and,
Yeah.
85 degrees at night, much more temperate here, much more easy to handle in the summertime without the need for air conditioning. And that's the other thing I noticed here is I have not seen any air conditioners in any of the housing units or the apartment units that I've seen here.
So do you have air conditioning yourself?
Nope.
No? You're winging it without it. Brave man. Well, if you don't need it, yeah, as long as you have heat in the sun in the winter.
Yeah, and just about every building has some form of heat, so that's been the nice part. And the heating that leads right into the economics. The cost to heat the apartment, my bills were significantly lower than when I was living in Boston.
Okay, so that segues us into the cost of living. So, what is the general cost of living in Vigo compared to other parts of Spain or even the US? I know, I'm sure it's a big difference from Boston. Boston is not the cheapest place.
That's true. But so for within Spain, Vigo and the whole area of Galicia is probably one of the lower priced areas. The prices have been going up. One of the things I see in the economic section of the newspapers is how rent prices have gone up steadily over the years. In fact, this morning in the television news, they were saying in the last 10 years, housing prices have gone up 35%, which to me seems small compared to what the price increases I've seen.
In the US, yeah.
So, apartments here are much more affordable. I have pretty much an equivalent apartment here in Vigo as to what I had in Boston, and I'm paying roughly a third of what I was paying in the Boston suburban area. With regard to the rest of Spain, though, Barcelona, the big cities, Barcelona, Madrid, Seville, Valencia, those are the much more expensive areas along the Costa del Sol and the Costa Blanca on the Mediterranean. Though if you're on the beach there, of course you're going to be paying more. Same for the islands, whether you're on Gran Canaria or Mallorca or Menorca. The islands, you'll be paying a little bit more.
Yes.
Inland, though, it's much more affordable. I follow another blog where, this couple from America settled inland in Asturias, which is between here and France. And they settled inland because their rent was outrageously cheap compared to what they're paying like $300 a month for a house.
Wow.
300 euros a month, not dollars, but 300 euros a month, which really is, considering location and cost of living for food and all the other services, and that's actually quite reasonable, even if they are in a somewhat more rural area.
So you're renting right now, right? How many bedrooms do you have in Beth?
So I have a two bedroom, two bathroom apartment. It's 110 square meters, which I think translates to about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. I don't know the exact
Uh-huh.
conversion. My apartment in Boston was two bedroom, two bath. And it wasn't even in Boston. It was in Quincy, which is, adjoining Boston, just to the south of Boston. And that one was almost 3,000 a month.
Wow.
So
So,
here I'm paying just a little over 1,100 euros a month, which is almost 1,200 a month.
wow.
So,
That's a great
significant
price
difference
for that
in just the price of,
space.
yeah, for a similar space.
Yeah. And is it in a elevated building or a walk up?
No, this is in an elevated building. Many of the apartments available in Vigo are in newer buildings that have elevators. They have central services, central heating. For instance, I have high-speed internet. It's fiber optic. So that makes it nice. There are a lot of historical buildings here. Vigo is a historic city. We can get into that later, but the more legacy architecture here is also being upgraded. So they're preserving the facades and preserving the structures themselves, and that's part of their historical preservation here. But they're also upgrading plumbing and electrical and communications with, built-in fiber optic and, making walls so that way you can have a wireless router without interference, that kind of thing.
That's great. That is great. How about utility prices, gas and electric? Do they use gas
Yeah, I get gas for the heating, and so I don't have gas piped into my specific unit. In other words, I don't have a gas stove or,
stove?
water heating is provided by the building. But I have noticed that my utility bills are probably less than half of what I was paying in Boston, if not less than that. The electricity here is on a demand use, so there are more expensive hours to use high electrical demand. So, once again, it's encouraging you to use your dishwasher and washing machine and, any other high level of electrical appliances. They'd rather have you run them at night
Night.
during the off-peak hours. I know many cities in the US do have that cost structure, but I noted that here as well. But even with that kind of cost structure and learning along the way over the last couple of months, I've noticed my bill is for water, sewage, and electricity. The utilities has been much lower. Same for the internet. The service here is there's Spain has been very clear as a federal government to encourage municipalities to make sure that people are connected and have the current kind of internet services. So even my internet service that comes with, I got the package. I really didn't need it, but I got the full package at probably a third or fourth of what I would pay in the
Well,
United States.
give
In
us
other
an
words, I
example.
have
What are you paying in Spain for internet service?
so I have a cell phone line, internet, which is I think I'm at 850 megabytes per second. I didn't get the 1 gig because I didn't need it. I have television service, and that cable includes all the premium channels, Max and well, you name it. You can still get the Prime Video subscription and Netflix. It also has every sports. They're big on their football here, so La Liga and the UFA, EUFA football, also the basketball. So everything kit and caboodle starting package was 45 euros a month, which
Oh my
is
God.
almost 50,
For
it's a little more
everything.
than $50 a month for everything.
Oh, that's incredible. Wow. That
Yeah.
is really incredible. How about the cost of groceries? Do you realize any savings?
That's another area where I've been just amazed. Being a person without a car in Boston, I didn't have a car. Public transport worked in Boston, and it was able to walk to and from the market carrying a couple bags. And here, once again, things are significantly less expensive. But I think Overall, what I'm seeing is the cost of living here is lower than what I saw in the United States, but also the wages are
Yes.
significantly lower. I think that's the balance that has happened here is for me coming from the United States, I see everything having a significantly lower price point, but the wages that I know of here and looking at, what I would be making in my profession, I would not be making the money I make when I work in the US.
So the locals might think otherwise and say, oh, it's so expensive here.
Yep.
And the
And even
expats are saying, no, it's not, it's cheap.
actually, I know a student who there's a lot of meetup groups, so it's a good way to meet people here. And there's one young lady, she finished school and wanted to stay in Spain, and she's been traveling, and she gets an apartment room for rent here and there, and to her it's a struggle to pay 300 euros a month
Yeah,
because getting work and maintaining enough work to be able to afford your rent and then everything else,
right.
go to these mixers, and even going out is a lot cheaper. You can go out and get a beer for probably a draft beer or even a bottle of beer for under 3 euros, but with that, 99% of the bars here and cafeterias here, the cafes, they serve you a beer and you get a little snack with it, whether it's a little piece of the tortilla, the egg and potato omelet. You might get a slice of bread with sausage. You might get some sliced cheese and a bowl of olives. You get a snack. Wine here is cheap. You can get a goblet of wine,
Here, you're lucky if you get a
for about
pretzel.
350. And yeah, and here, with the wine, you get another snack. If you order coffee here, it's outrageously inexpensive. But once again, everybody,
Drinks cost.
it's constantly, for under $2, you can get, an espresso corto. I drink cafe americano because it's closest to drip coffee from home. But you order a coffee and you get a little bit of pastry. You get a little
Wow.
piece of coffee cake. You get a little piece of sponge cake. You might get a small croissant. You get something with it. And the thing I have noticed is American style junk food is probably more expensive. You order a Coke, you get a little itty bitty 6 ounce can. You're paying 3.50, €3 50 cents for that, which is almost $4.
Right.
And if you want potato chips, American style, a lot of places will have those as the salty snack. But if you want like American style food, it costs you more. It really does.
Yeah, and it's crappier food for you.
Yeah, the
But
healthy food, like you can get these wonderful snacks, and they're homemade. You might get a little itty bitty bowl, a little crock of lentils or garbanzos with pork. It's like, yeah, these are, and it's like, and they're all local
that's
dishes.
great.
It's nice. You get a nice little healthy dish.
That's great. And also wine. Of course, wine in Spain is really cheap. Like you can probably get a glass of wine for less than you could water.
In many cases, yes. Once again, all the restaurants here by law have to be able to provide you with tap water. They won't offer it. But if you request a water, and they'll bring you a bottle of water and charge you gladly 3 euros for that small
Yeah.
bottle of water. They typically don't serve things with ice. They will ask you if you want it cold and ice. Typically, for a soft drink, they will serve it with ice as well. But ice is another thing that is uniquely American, and same for like the free refills on soft drinks. You don't see that here.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can drink the tap water, correct?
Oh yeah, the tap water
It's not
here.
like Mexico.
No, in fact, EU regulations require all the tap water to be drinkable and safe for human consumption.
I
So I notice a lot of people still buy bottled water. A lot of people use like a Brita filter at home. My my unit owner, left a Brita water filter. I use it because I don't know if I want to, the water here. It can be hard at times. It does have that character to it, but
yeah.
at the same time, I haven't found anything objectionable in the water here, other than, sometimes it comes out of the tap warmer that I'm used to as well.
Well, here too in Phoenix, our cold water is hot. So, all right. So, okay. So, cost of living, it's mighty fine as
Yeah,
compared to
I
the
mean,
US.
I found the same with healthcare too. A visa holder and a visa resident, I'm obligated to carry a private health insurance. I'm not, you have to be here X number of years before you can get on their socialized medicine system. So the full coverage and the requirement for the visa holders, whether it's an NLV or DNV, whatever kind of visa it is, no copay, no deductible, full coverage for everything. And I'm literally paying a fifth of what I was paying for Mass Health, the America Care Act
Give us
in
an
Houston.
example. What are you paying for private health
For private
insurance now?
health here, 100, and this includes dental coverage, so I'm paying 138 euros a month.
Wow,
And in Massachusetts, it was over 700.
incredible. Incredible. That's, and you get everything. So even the private, okay, so with private, they give you, if you choose, an English speaking doctor.
If you can find one. And unfortunately, in Vigo, there are not
It's hard to come.
many English speaking doctors, but
Wow.
they're very helpful. And Google Translate on your phone in the doctor's office is really helpful.
Are you fluent in Spanish?
I'm not fluent. I'm conversant. I'm comfortable with it. My vocabulary is limited because I hadn't spoken Spanish on a regular basis in over 10 years. So, and then some of the local expressions here are different than what they are in the US as well. So there's a little
But
bit
you
of
seem
cultural
like you
difference.
can get by. Are you going to be studying more or taking Spanish
Actually, it's more
classes?
through social groups here. There are Spanish speaking learning groups. There's people in Spain that want to learn English. So, you can join a social group where the Spaniards want to practice their English and
That's
the
great.
expats want to practice their Spanish. So, it's a nice trade, a nice social interaction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's
But I
definitely
would say, yeah, but I would say the only thing that with the medical care is the one thing that is not covered is prescriptions.
okay. So
But
I understand that. And how affordable, because I'm going to say how affordable are prescription meds?
for generics, I would say it extremely affordable. For instance, my high blood pressure medication that, I was paying, a $10 copay at CVS in the Boston area. For that same generic prescription here, I'm paying €2.50.
Crazy.
For the branded ones, you're paying a little bit more, but you're not paying the exorbitant 300, 400, $500 a month for that. For instance, the branded prescription that I'm on right now, instead of the $350 a month that I would have paid without insurance in Boston, it cost me 52 euros, which,
It's,
wasn't horrible. It was higher than I was surprised, but at the same time, it's good to know they do. And I'm thinking it's because the state here, the government actually does the price setting and negotiation with the providers, with
yeah,
the pharmaceutical companies themselves.
I would think so. So, okay. I believe also after a year, you can get onto the public system if you wanted to.
Yeah, I have not looked into that, and part of that is I know that there's one of one of the downsides of living in Spain is the bureaucracy. So unless you find a professional to help you, either a lawyer or some sort of agent that will shepherd you through, and then you have to
Yes.
pay this person. The bureaucracy, the wheels turn very slowly, and if you have one form filled out incorrectly, they
Send you
send you to the end
back.
of the pile.
Yeah, they send you back. And then you do that form and you bring that form that they asked for, and they're like, oh no, we need this form. All right, why didn't you tell me the first time?
Yep.
That sort of stuff. That's bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So, how about your waiting time? Since you're on the public system, you shouldn't have that much of a wait. So, if you made an appointment for a GP or a specialist, how long do you think you would wait for an appointment?
Well, I recently needed some prescriptions refilled, so I called the doctor's office and I got in that evening.
Can't answer
And I
better
think
than that.
they do that with the private health insurers because there's a payment involved. Whereas,
Yes,
if it's through the public system, the payment probably takes longer to process and there's more bureaucracy
this is
associated
more
with that.
people
So,
too.
I think on the public system. But the other thing I have learned is on the public system is if you're near a hospital, Hospitals will take walk-ins, a lot like urgent care, not necessarily an emergency department, but
Hmm.
they will take walk-ins on an as available basis. And so, that's one thing I've learned also is, if I'm not able to get a hold of a doctor or get a hold of a specialist, I can go to a hospital and, just get in line and wait if I needed to.
And how close are you to the nearest hospital?
Probably a 10-minute walk.
That's great. That's great. Okay, another segue into transportation and walkability. So, usually, what I've been hearing from different cities in Spain, everything is pretty much walkable, and they have a superb transportation system, mostly rail system, either high speed rail or local rail. First of all, is Vigo walkable? Can you easily access everyday essentials like the market, the pharmacy, bakery, bank without a car?
Yes. And I'll preface the walkability factor based on the culture that I see here. After having spent time in Barcelona and in Madrid and in many other cities, while hunting for a city to settle in, part of the culture here is very Mediterranean across the country, and it's very much like Italy. At the end of the workday, in Italy, they call it passaggio. In Spain, it's the paseo, and it's your stroll. You go out, you stretch your legs. It's late in the afternoon. It's cooling down. The sun is setting. You get to know your neighbors. You stop and have a beer or a wine at a cafe or a cafeteria or a bar. You're out and about before dinner, and it's universal. I mean, old people, young people, the teenagers gather. The children are there playing, soccer with the ball on the street. It becomes, but it's a very cultural aspect where the cities are walkable because everybody's out walking. And so, the walkability of the city, the sidewalks tend to be wider. If you're in a neighborhood where there's a narrow sidewalk, it's because everybody's headed to another area to do their paseo. The challenge with walking in Vigo, I would say, is the hills. Vigo has San Francisco style hills in some
Oh boy.
areas, but Vigo has some technology that they've invested and they understand the need for walkability in the city. And so there's outdoor escalators with, sunshades and wind covers that these escalators operate every day of the year, winter and summer. So if you need to go up a street and it's a very steep climb and you don't want to take the stairs or the steep hill, you can take an escalator. Now, not every hill has this, but the ones where people move a lot, and then also on Gran Via, which I think translates more as Broadway, where it's a major business street and fashion area and all that. That hill is not as steep as stairs, but they have the moving walkways like in the airports going
Wow.
uphill there. So once again, they maintain that walkability factor for cultural reasons. And then, once again, it's nice to be able to get out and walk, and everything is accessible. So I live in the center of the city, but I've noticed in the neighborhoods here, within 2 blocks of my apartment, there's no fewer than 10 cafe bar combinations that serve food, drinks, coffee in the morning, pastries. There's at least two bakeries now, three now that I think about it. Three bakeries. There's two butcher shops. There's one fish shop. There's two florists. There's
Banks?
four supermarkets and three banks and several ATMs available as well. So, and I'm also
Wow.
between the two major railway stations. So, I can walk to either railway station and hop on a train and get to cities linking me to Madrid. And there is actually a high-speed train that leaves one of the stations here and gets to Madrid in about 4 hours. And the mayor here has approached the railway operator to say, we need that to be less than 4 hours. Can you not make 6 stops along the way? Can you put an express train into Vigo so it's not 4 hours? Because, it's 2 hours to the southern coast from Madrid. And, it seems to be a spoke system where many trains or all trains converge onto Madrid. So if I wanted to go to Barcelona, I first take a train to Madrid and then
Right.
transfer to Barcelona. Same for Valencia, so the Seville, any of the other cities. even Bilbao, it would be much faster for me to take the 4 hour train into Madrid and then take a 4 hour train out to Bilbao. So it becomes an all day travel, but it's also outrageously inexpensive. I compared to Amtrak and flying, the railways here are very affordable and very
Efficient.
reliable.
Yeah. That sounds wonderful. I mean, I can't get over the escalators. I was going to say, do they have some sort of trolley system? But maybe they
Yeah.
do. I don't know.
No trolleys and no subway in Vigo, even as big of a city as it is. But being a port city, they do have a lot of buses, and I'm still learning the bus system to get around to various areas of the city. It's like most of them are helpful, and the stops all have QR codes that will tell you when the next bus coming and where it's going. So yeah, it's a very good comprehensive bus system. Once again, it's very inexpensive, under €2 for a bus ride. And then if you get a resident card, it becomes like 65 cents. So,
Yeah. And how
once
about
again, public
seniors? I
transport
think
is very cheap.
seniors go for free on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I have to apply for my senior card once I get like my residency permit. I can then apply because senior status here is above 60 years old. So same for the railway system. I get a 15% discount for being over 60 to take the high-speed train anywhere in Spain.
wow. Do they have local markets also where you can buy food, fresh vegetables, and fresh fruits?
Yeah, also in the neighborhood, and in addition to all the other, nice facilities, there's 3 fruit stands. They're fruit and vegetable markets. They have all the local fruits and vegetables, and they're seasonal. I mean, rarely do you see anything that, I mean, anything that I've noticed out of season is going to have a price premium. But I've noticed that at the supermarkets, at the 4 supermarkets that are in within very close walking distance here. There's also a couple of restaurants that specialize in pre-prepared food. So, a take-home meal that, come bring home and put in your oven. And, it's all local cuisine. So, the interesting, options here as well as regular restaurants. But you also have some of these options of the local food and then locally prepared food.
So, do you find yourself going out to markets and making purchases? Because in Spain, everything is a little bit smaller, refrigerators are smaller. So, do you buy a smaller quantity of food for your home to prepare? Or, on the other hand, you could probably go out to eat for cheaper.
It's hard to not go out to eat. It really is because going out to eat here, it is like, even like at the end of the day when they tend to have their smaller meal, if I have a glass of wine and a little tapa snack, to me, that's enough. But as far as going to the market in the smaller storage areas, that kind of stuff, yeah, they don't have, I haven't seen anything like a Costco here. Now, their markets are big. They have you know, 3 of the markets in this neighborhood, they have a huge footprint and they're great big supermarkets, but you don't see the 32 pack of paper towels. And what I do notice is
Or toilet paper.
people walk to the market, if not every day, every other day, every third day. And that's a hard habit for me to break. I try to do shopping once a week. And it's like, no, I'm just going to go to the market every other day. Once again, because
You have to carry
everything's
it,
fresher anyway.
and you have
And
to carry it home.
yeah, I have to carry it home. And then the nice part is at the supermarkets, I can get everything I want in one spot. They have wine,
Right.
beer, food, meat, fish, whatever you can. But it's like, nope, I can't buy everything all at once there because then you have to carry it. I also like going to the little fruit stands, vegetable stands at their storefronts. But, once again, you see the stock rotate much more frequently. And there's some, odd things like in the produce department at the supermarket. You don't take your produce, put it in a bag, and take it to the check stand. There's a person there that will put it on the scale, prepare a tag, and then tag it. And then if you have 3 or 4 different things, like if I have lettuce, tomato, and onion, and a grapefruit, they'll weigh them all individually, and then they'll put them all into one produce bag, and then put one label, and it gets scanned once. But then when my receipt gets, it has everything itemized individually.
Wow.
But they have that set up where they have an attendant in the produce department do that
Hmm.
for you.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool. Wow. Okay. Let's see. So, what it reminds me of, Spain and different cities also in Spain remind me of the old days in when I lived in New York. So when we had, and I'm sure in Boston too, in the 60s and 70s, you had specialty stores. So you had a butcher, you had a bakery, you had a shoemaker, one cobbler, or, you had all of these little mom and pop shops. And it seems like Vigo also has those type of shops where what we don't really see much anymore in the US because everything is supermarket and everything could be pretty much done either at a supermarket or a store. So the butchers are pretty much gone and you have to get your meats and poultry in a supermarket. So it's different, Vigo, correct?
Yes, and like at the supermarket, when you go to the meat counter, they have the packages of hamburger and packages of, roast and steaks, whatever. But most people, because it's a very social society,
Hmm.
most people will sit, in line and wait and talk to the butcher and have, a roast cut or meat ground. And, they chat, they catch up, they find out what's fresh, they find out what's on sale, and there's a lot of chit chat. Same at what I'm going to call the deli counter, where they have all the dried meats and sausages and cheeses. And, they have all the pre-prepared stuff and pre-wrapped stuff, but people wait in line and do the chatting. And I think that's why the small mom and pop stores still survive, because people go to the butcher and they chat with the
And they
butcher and find
chat.
out what's, the freshest that day. And the fishermen, once again, because this is a port city, the fish is literally coming right off the boat. And then the vegetable stands as well. So, you get fruits and vegetables and, people are chatting with and just, doing that daily interaction almost. Uh,
And the
and
bakery,
and
fresh
yeah, bakery.
baker
Oh,
baked
oh my
goods.
God, bakeries here are amazing, and that's one thing that you see on Sundays. Bakeries are one of the few stores that are open, and people are lined up to get their loaves of bread. And it's
Bread.
not the
Hmm.
sliced Wonder Bread kind of bread; it's like the big long baguettes or the round country style loaves. And then they
So,
all always have the dessert pastries, that kind of stuff as well. But those small shops do make a difference. There's three shoe repair shops in the area. It's amazing to see that there's still a business. And once again, I think it's just because people like that interaction. And plus, you're not loading up a trunk of a car and taking it and unloading it and then taking it into your house. You're walking with a couple of bags everywhere you go, and every day that you go out, you're picking up something. I've also learned keep my nylon bag in my pocket, because if I stop at a store, it's like, oh, I can pick this up, because
you need
otherwise
a
they charge
bag.
you for a bag everywhere you go.
Right. That's so funny. Here in the US, to go to a shoe store or shoemaker, what they used to call it here, if you had a hole in your sole or your heel wore down, you'd go to the shoemaker and they would put new soles and new heels on your shoes. No more. Now you throw out the shoes and you get a new pair usually. So, and I'm sure it's different than in Vigo.
Well, I think there's an economic driver there too, because the other thing I have noticed here is clothes and shoes are relatively more expensive than the discounts that are available in the US. Not to say that it's not totally unavailable. Like, there's Primark here. Primark is probably the closest thing to a large discount retailer here. But once again, those are the very inexpensive, high volume marketed clothes that they get from
Right.
Asia, from China and Thailand, India. You go to the more traditional department store, which in Spain is called El Corte Inglés,
Mhm.
which is pretty much the Macy's of Spain.
Yeah.
You're going to pay a lot more, significant amount more for everything there. But, once again, if you're spending $150 or 150 euros on a pair of shoes, you're going to take care of those shoes.
Right.
And if something happens to those shoes, yeah, you're going to take them to a local shoe shop, because they're everywhere here, and they're going to help you maintain and keep them in good shape.
Good to know. Good to know. Okay, let's get into the LGBTQ community, or do we even have one in Vigo? I don't know. Vigo would support that. And again, it's very open minded in all of Spain. So tell us a little bit about the community. Have you met any other LGBTQ people?
Yes, I have. And it's hard finding an organized community here because, once again, everything seems so thoroughly integrated. There's no specific gay bar. There is a community group that is a social group. They do social activism and social activities. One of the original like lesbian organizations in Vigo, and they have this legacy of being a part of the community. But you know that's that kind of activism is they maintain visibility, but I think it's more for the legacy than for the need, because if there's anything that ever happens from a homophobia kind of perspective or an anti-gay or an anti-LGBTQ plus perspective, there's a spotlight that's put on that. For instance, one of the Mediterranean coast, what do you call it, resort cities, Torremolinos, which is
It's a big day.
it's a resort city on the beach, and it's a very gay friendly city. But there
Hmm.
was an incident this past weekend where there were homophobic slurs that were hurled very loudly and publicly at a couple in Torremolinos, and the police instantly took action. They wanted a statement from the people that the slurs were directed from, and by putting that spotlight on it in the national news, it
Hmm.
makes it very clear that this is a community that we accept, and we don't want that kind of hate-filled rhetoric spread in Spain. And because something like that happens rarely. I think Spain has gotten to the point where, there isn't a huge need. Now in Madrid and Barcelona, the bigger cities, Madrid has the Trueca, the gayborhood, the pink zone, the one
Right.
other side. And that's really neat. I like that. It reminds me of like, the gay neighborhoods in many other big cities. But you come to an area like Vigo where I can walk down one of the areas in Old Town, and, there's same-sex couples holding hands. There's that edge of counterculture where you have, the people that dress differently, have their hair different done differently. They have the multiple piercings, they have the multiple tattoos. The Q aspect that whether they're gay, straight, whatever, but they're just different.
Different.
Um, there doesn't seem to be much separation. Now, they like to congregate in some of the same places. There's a couple of music bars that have live music, and they're playing music that these particular groups like, but they're not exclusive. I can walk into one of those bars not wearing leather, not wearing tattoos, not having any piercings, and wearing you know my 62-year-old attire, and not feel ostracized or odd, like the oddball that hey, I'm not integrated with the way that
Right.
they're acting or the way they're dressing or the way they're presenting themselves. I haven't encountered that anywhere at any of the bars where there's that kind of gathering or that kind of culture within an organization or a venue.
Do you know if they have a pride festival?
Now, Vigo doesn't have a pride. Now, in Galicia or Pontevedra, which is the individual part of one of the 3 or 4 provinces in Galicia, the pride will be taking place in A Coruña, which is one of the other larger cities on the northern coast in Pontevedra. That will be in July. And once again, it's the entire geographic area is invited to participate. I'm looking forward to it because I want to see how that compares to, say, the Boston Pride Parade. When I lived in Boston, I was a member of the Mass Bears and Cubs group, and our organization would be represented in the parade, and that was a huge production. Our group, we usually had fewer than 20 representatives. We had our bear flags, and we would march, and we would enjoy being part of the Pride Parade. But then there were other organizations like the big corporations that had here's 1,000 marchers, or here's a dance troupe, and they're playing music and dancing, and it's like, no, we were a much smaller organization, but really that parade was an amazing event because even though it was 2 miles long, there were probably more than 2 miles worth of groups and floats and bands and other forms of entertainment.
Okay. Have you made friends with a group of either LGBTQ expats or locals or just any type of group of expats?
So for the meeting your group of expats, there's an app on the Android system called Meetup, and I'd heard about this from friends in Boston. So I ran into somebody here, and they said, "Well, use Meetup here in Vigo." I said, "It's available here in Vigo, and there's a lot of Meetup groups here."
Wow.
So one of the things you can select in this app is, what kind of groups you want to connect with, and once again, there's an LGBTQ plus moniker. So I added that, and what I have found is the one organization that identified as, here's for the community, the LGBTQ plus community, is the one organization that I spoke about earlier that was started out as a lesbian organization, but they've kind of grown it and they're just active in the community. But many of the other groups in Meetup add the LGBTQ plus tag and category to their events because they want to make sure everybody
Is
knows you're
included.
welcome. So, I'm with a couple of groups that speak, they're the English speaking groups, and one's an expat group, and they both have those tags. And so both of those groups, I've met other people in the LGBTQ plus community. It's given me some points of contact and some ideas, but from a strictly, you know, how do I meet somebody else in my community? That's probably been the best way to do it, just because there's not that I don't want to say there's not a need for exclusivity. It just doesn't happen here. It's from an organic perspective. There, I think if I were out and about and I found somebody that I wound up, chatting with, and and if they said, "Are you gay? Would you like to, go out on a date?" I don't think that would be awkward, as not like it would be in other cultures. So
Right.
I just that's what I've experienced here. I'm not saying it's universal, but at the same time,
Like nobody
there
cares.
it seems limiting here in Vigo in Galicia, but at the same time, I don't feel limited that, I can find and speak to other people in the community. And also, you talk about health issues and, in our community there, I lived through the HIV horrors of the
Yep.
80s and 90s. So, you still want to ask questions and learn about those kind of resources, that kind of stuff
Sure.
too.
Sure. Awesome. So you feel perfectly safe as a gay person. Well, you don't have the label that says you're gay, but know, you feel perfectly fine.
I'm perfectly fine no matter what time of day or night. I've become a night owl just because the
Culture.
the time zone here shifted. For instance, it is now almost 9:30 at night, and the sun will not set for another 15 or 20 minutes,
Wow.
just because of the way the time zone works here. So the evenings will go later. The social life here happens later as well.
Yes.
Dinner time is 8 p.m. or later. To have dinner at 10 p.m. is not a big deal here. And on the weekends, the clubbing age, if you're of clubbing age, you don't go out until midnight. I mean,
Right.
there is a nightclub in Old Town here. It's about a 12-minute walk from my apartment. And it's been around since the 90s, and it has a rainbow flag, and it attracts the LGBTQ plus community. But every time I've been in there, it has just as many, say, heterosexual couples as there are same-sex couples and everything in between. And I've left that venue at 3:30 in the morning and walked home and not had any problem of feeling safe. The ability to walk around and not worry about
Getting shot.
what's who you may encounter, or am I going to get mugged, is there going to be a pickpocket, there's not that feeling. And me being this white male, and I there's a sense of privilege there, but at the same time I have seen groups of young women do the same thing, at 1:30 in the
That's what
morning,
I hear.
headed out to one of the dancing clubs, and they're there in their high heels and sequins and dresses and walking to through town. And even though there's maybe only two or three of them, they're not concerned. They're out for,
That's what I hear.
and acting very comfortably, not with, watching behind their back. Like, I have a daughter who, when she would go to San Francisco, it was like, okay, you have to be on guard. You have to be, aware of what's around you.
Right.
The, I don't see that here.
Yeah. Like when I take, sometimes you have to take the dog out in the middle of the night. Sometimes, I was on a when I was working not too long ago. I would take the dog out at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and in the states, you can look over your shoulder, you know, and see what's going on if anybody is following you or something. Whereas it sounds like in Vigo, it's not an issue.
Yeah. And not to say that there's no crime. I read in the newspaper, there's domestic violence that happens. But they make sure that it's thoroughly reported in the newspaper. There is sexual violence that does happen. It doesn't seem to be at a very frequent rate. Yeah, you don't hear about murders. I've seen more other kinds of violent crime, but that's not the numbers that I've seen in a city this size in the United States. A city of
Sure.
500,000, metropolitan area of 500,000 in the United States, you'd probably hear or see something a little bit more frequently if you looked for it. Once again, the newspapers here, and that's the other thing is there's two local newspapers and two national newspapers. When you go for your coffee in the morning, the newspaper's right there. People are reading the daily paper and you're seeing the local and national news every morning. And people are still on their phones, scrolling through phones as well. But the papers here are, as a hard copy, is still part of the culture here.
I like
Something
that.
in the U.S. It's all gone
It's
electronic. The
gone.
electronic
Yeah, it's
Times and
almost gone.
everything.
I like
Yeah,
newspaper stands and pick up a paper and just touching the paper, getting
yeah.
the print on you. Kind of miss that. Okay, very good. So pretty safe. Of course, Spain outlaws guns, so there's no guns allowed except for hunting.
Right.
All
Yeah,
right, let's get into arts, culture, and leisure. So, have you noticed what the cultural scene might be in Vigo? Are there any museums, theater, music, festivals going on?
that's one of the bonuses that I realized when I seriously started considering Vigo as a potential, home and permanent place to live, is the culture here. There, there are a couple of large theaters. One of them is a newer venue. It's a multi-purpose performance venue. The second week I was here, I attended the Ukrainian opera production of Rigoletto. So, it had the full orchestra, the full operatic chorus, and full opera production, full stage, and, in all its glory. Wasn't quite the Met, but at the same time, it was a well done, well performed in a suitable venue, full on opera. I have attended, there's another space that's multi use as well, but it's more for plays and musicals. Phantom of the Opera, the European tour, will be stopping here in July. There's in
Is it all in
Galicia,
Spanish?
yes, which was a learning experience. I actually saw Phantom of the Opera in Madrid, and it became a brand new experience because in Spanish it's just slightly different. The songs are still the same songs, but the intonations and the feeling can be just a slight bit different because of the Spanish culture and the way the Spanish language works. So, that's been fun. But the culture here, yes. I mean, and, there's, J Lo is going to be here in July.
Oh,
So, we get the big arena acts as well as, the high culture of, the opera and orchestra. There was a recital last night of what do you call it, Baroque art and music in Garcia Barbon Teatro up the street. So I missed that because I had a doctor's appointment. My doctor's appointment was at 8 p.m., believe it or not.
wow. Wow.
So the doctor's office that I had discovered, it was open between 10 and 1 and then between 5 and 8.
8. You the last
Yeah.
appointment.
Yeah. So, I mean, but once again, culture and museums, there's at least two art museums here that I can think of off the top of my head. I know that there's more museums. There's a history museum as well. The other thing about Spain that I've noticed in my multiple trips here is the public art. So there are statues commissioned everywhere. If there's a new building, if there's, a corner lot that's being redeveloped, one of the instant things that happen that goes out that I realize is okay, what kind of art is going to go up there? Who's going to fund the art? And then who's going to be the artist? What kind of art is it going to be? Is it going to be a mural? Is it going to be a statue? Is it going to be a sculpture out of metal, sculpture out of stone? Every park here has multiple statues and fountains. New buildings have, sculptures and art built into them as far as visual. The street here down, every traffic circle that goes down the main street in my neighborhood has a artistic element, whether it's a
Mm.
fountain, whether it's video screens. There's a metal sculpture at the end of mine. There's sculptures everywhere and art everywhere in just about every Spanish city. It's
Wow.
amazing to see how much value they put on the visual art as well as all the performing arts.
And Spaniards love a festival. Tell us, have you seen any festivals? Or I'm sure you like that's a given.
Yeah, the a couple of festivals. I arrived the day after Three Kings Day, which is their big Christmas time holiday, and I thought, okay, the travel will be done, and the festivals will be done, and they'll be done. And it's like, nope, nope. The Alameda, which is a big parkway with fountains and statues and parks and playgrounds and stuff, was filled with booths of local artisans selling handmade goods and every kind of food, every local wine, local beer, local bread, local cheese, local cured meats, handmade jewelry, hand woven textiles, all kinds of stuff. And that lasted until like the second weekend in January when they turned off all the lights for all the Christmas decorations and said, okay,
Hmm.
thank you for a wonderful year. Next year we'll be back. The other festival that they had was called the Reconquista, which was extremely local. There's a lot of local festivals, and this local festival was about chasing the French away, the Napoleonic armies back in 1807.
Wow.
And so, once again, the Galician culture, they had people in traditional dress. They do like they do in Concord, Massachusetts, with the pipers and the war reenactments. And you have people dressed as French soldiers with the fancy French coats and the big hats. And
Cool.
you have the Spaniards dressed that way, and they do a serious march. The musicians, they bring out the bagpipes and the kilts because we're in
Wow.
northern Spain. And so
Love
there's
it.
bagpipes and kilts being played. The women's groups, they sing and do traditional Galician songs with nothing more than a tambourine and two scallop shells that they rub against each other for rhythm. And then they sing these lovely traditional songs along with all the food and the booze once again. And that festival, even though it spanned a week, it started on, one weekend with a soft opening, and then the next weekend was the big one. But all along, every night the booths were open selling food and goods. They had stuff for the children. They had a travel treasure hunt. They had history stuff for the children. Lots of hands-on things for children to do, as well as, you know, things that carried on until 3 in the morning for those who could carry on until 3 in the morning.
Wow.
They know how to pace themselves. I mean, there was, the liquor laws here are just amazing because you could just see people walking around with a glass of wine or a cup of beer everywhere you went. And it wasn't just the main square in the city. There's plazas, within many areas. And, in 8 or 12 plazas that I walked through, they were all packed with people, revelers enjoying this lovely festival. And that was mid-March. So, it was an amazing experience, and it was also a good taste of the culture here because it was very Galicia centric in what
Hmm.
they were doing. So, good education as well as having a lot of fun.
That sounds wonderful. It really does. Really sounds like a lot of fun. Of course, 3 in the morning, I'm in my fifth dream by then. In fact, 10:30, I'm in my second dream. So, anyway, that's because I'm old. Let's get into dining and cuisine. One of my favorite subjects is eating. And Spain has a great reputation of restaurants and cafes and everything to that sort. So tell us a little bit about the food scene in Vigo. And are there Michelin star rated restaurants there? What type? Could we get any type of international cuisine there?
For the most part, yes. And that's one of the things that I forgot where I read the article, but it was in more than once, where Galicia in Spain, which is this northwest corner of Spain, has the highest per capita percentage of Michelin star restaurants. So
Interesting.
within a 10-minute walk of my apartment, there are four Michelin star restaurants.
Wow.
One of them, it's an older star. It says it's a Michelin star from 2018, but it's still a white tablecloth restaurant where you get a good meal. The most recent one that had been awarded a star, I think it was back in 2023, and I'm not sure if they got it again in 2024. I haven't visited that restaurant again. But once again, the Galician cuisine, they take advantage of, number one, the amazing seafood here because they're on the North Shore of Spain, nice icy cold water, and they have all kinds of shellfish. They have, lobster, they have crab, they have all, bivalves, the clams, the oysters, mussels. They have mussel farms in the estuary here. They actually are known for their mussels here that are amazing. And then in addition to the shellfish, the finfish, they have a lot of shark. There's something that they call, it's not Brent, it's like hake. It's, a white fish, a very
Yeah.
common. They're big on
Like a
anchovies and
sea
sardines
bass.
here. So if you like oily fish, they're good with that
Love
here. The other one
salmon.
is similar to monkfish in the United States. Monkfish, which is a great big ugly fish that Bostonians love and call the poor man's lobster.
Poor man's
That's
lobster.
a very
Yeah.
common fish here. That and cod. They do the salted cod here, much like they do in Portugal. So a lot of salted cod is available year round here. As far as variety, there's two Italian grocers here, and I think they supply a lot of the rest of the restaurants here because there's at least three restaurants that serve strictly Italian cuisine. It's not Italian American. It's not Italian with a Spanish flair. It is Italian. You're getting, pasta from the south of Italy or pasta from the north of Italy, depending on which restaurant you're at. You're getting Napoli style pizza or you're getting Sicilian style pizza. They're very specific, just like Italian food is in Italy. But it's all very authentic. They get, they have their type zero flour for the pizza. They have the dried pasta. They make their own pasta. It's very traditional Italian. And two of the restaurants that I'm think of right that I've been to actually are Neapolitan, and they're all within easy walking distance. Up the hill from me is an Indian restaurant. Yesterday I discovered a ramen restaurant and I tried it
Hmm.
and I wanted a spicy dish and boy did I ordered the middle spice and it turned out to be the Spanish palate. It tends not to like spicy food,
Spice.
but this Asian ramen shop delivered. I know where to go when I want spicy food. Then in the Indian restaurant, there's a couple of Mexican restaurants in walking distance that once again, all these neighborhoods are built with these places to be in walking distance, and I'm lucky enough to be in a place where there's at least two Mexican restaurants, both of them with roots in Mexico. But when I've asked for spicy food from them, it's toned down to the Spanish palate.
Right.
Uh,
So I
so
understand that Chinese food is a little scarce in Spain.
there's two Chinese restaurants within walking distance of my house, and then there's a chain restaurant at the mall. So there's a mall that's also very close to this neighborhood. And actually, the mall is part of the train station.
Wow.
So the trains are at the lower level, and then the upper two levels are the mall, and then the third level of the mall is like more like a
Food
food court
court.
restaurant area and entertainment venue because there's a stage with lighting, and then it's adjoining the movie theater. So it's a big space, lots of shopping and then once again, you can get, some chain food there too. They actually have a Burger King, McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Taco Bell, and a Hollywood restaurant there. So yeah,
I would hope nobody goes there.
actually the food here, because of the European laws, seems to be healthier. It doesn't seem to be
Even the fast food, I'm sure, is healthier
even
because they have
yeah.
the EU laws. Yeah.
Yeah, the EU health laws and food laws, they make sure that you're not getting a lot of chemicals added to you and preservatives. That's the other thing I've noticed from the grocery stores here is that things have to be fresh because they don't last as long. I
Right.
mean, like I've noticed I have to cook meat faster. If I get meat, I got to cook it within 3 days. I can't put it in the fridge for more than 3 days. Otherwise, I put it in the freezer. So, that it helps you maintain freshness of everything. And I think the restaurants also have to deal with that. So the restaurants always have fresh food.
And restaurants close for siesta for the most part.
Most of them do. Now, if it's a cafe, a cafeteria, or a bar, many of them will stay open. It depends on the owner. Now, siesta, I'm one of the older people that will gladly say, yes, I'm going to take advantage of siesta time.
Take a nap
But what I've learned that, people with families, people that, don't necessarily need a nap, they use that time
for
to
family time.
catch up. Yeah. So, children are out of school, so they're picking up their kids and getting their kids home and settled and stuff like that. They're preparing or starting dinner. They're doing laundry. You can't run any errands because nothing's open. The only thing that's open during siesta time that I know of is a couple of the grocery stores. Even like the fruit and vegetable stands, the shoe stores, the shoe repair shops,
Yep,
the
they'll all
the
close.
butchers, those all close, like between 1 and 4, between 1 and 5. You just don't, the banks are closed. So, people take care of their personal duties at that time, is what I've learned. If you're not taking a nap, you're busy catching up with something at home.
Do a lot of the restaurants still have a menu del dia, the menu of the day, and have like a
Yeah.
three-course thing for really cheap?
Yeah, it's not as cheap as in some areas because, and I think if you go further inland, it can be cheaper. I think it's just because once again they have to rotate their stock. But that's one thing that most travelers have to understand is when you ask for the menu, you get the menu del dia. If you want to see the full menu of everything that a restaurant offers, you have to ask for la carta. So when you ask for the menu and you get the menu del dia, you get a choice of 1 or 2 appetizers, you get a choice of 1 or 2 main dishes. You can pay a little extra and get a dessert with it. Most of them
And a
come with a
drink.
beverage, so you can get either a wine, a beer, a water, a soft drink, or a coffee as your beverage with the menu del dia. And a lot of them, it's just traditional local food.
How
So,
much would it
you
be?
know,
Like a typical
depending, if I get it without the dessert, it's usually between 10 and 12 euros. If you get it with dessert, it's 14 or 15 euros. So,
incredible.
you get the full meal and the serving sizes there are, the full size, not like the tapas. For the appetizer, you get the little tapa size, dish of whatever. But, for your entree, you're going to get meat and potato, meat and noodles. You're going to get fish and whatever. So, and the only thing that I would say you don't get frequently, unless it's part of the menu del dia, is a salad. And that's one thing that I kind of miss here is if I order a salad, it's actually a separate course, either a la carte or from the menu. And that is usually another 7 or 8 euros.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I can get a hamburger and fries. Those are usually between 8 and 11 euros, depending on where you're at. But it's a bar burger. It's not like McDonald's is, you're going to pay McDonald's prices. And actually, I haven't even been to the McDonald's here.
Stay away.
But
Go for the real stuff.
go for the real stuff. But they're still reasonably priced, and you get a full meal at those places. But if you want a salad, you actually have to request a salad, and then you get a big
A
salad.
big
So it's
salad.
usually best to go with somebody to share the salad if you're going to have a salad with your meal.
Right. Sounds wonderful. Dining sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go on to visas and residency. So you mentioned that you were on a digital nomad visa. Do you know what types of other visas they have available?
So to get into Spain quickly, I went the digital nomad route where because I really wanted to continue working for a little while longer. The other kind of visa is called a non-lucrative visa, also
Mhm.
called the retirement visa.
Retirement.
Non-lucrative visa means you have to be able to demonstrate passive income of probably, I think, 2,300 euros a month to when you apply, and then you have to meet all the other visa requirements. But you have to have a passive income, meaning from rental, from investments, from a pension, from Social Security, from some sorts that's paying you a regular monthly benefit. They don't accept just 401k. They want it as a passive income, not just savings. So for a
Hmm.
lot of people, that may
Interesting.
be an issue unless you claim Social Security, because even most Social Security payments would meet most of that 2,300 a
Right.
month requirement, and that's for a single person. Now it goes up for 2 people. I think it jumps up to 3,700, and then adding one child to a family makes it 4,300, and then a little bit more with if you have more children or if you bring in a grandparent or parent. an additional person to the household. So the non-lucrative visa is very similar to the digital nomad visa as far as income requirements. For the digital nomad visa, I can't work for a Spanish company. I can't do work and collect income from a Spanish company. In other words, I can't take a job away from Spaniard.
Right.
So I can work for any non-Spain company. I'm working for as a consultant in the pharmaceutical industry for the United States, and I have been for more than 15 years. So, to me, it wasn't difficult to show, yes, I have this history of being a consultant in this industry. There's some longevity requirements that you have to demonstrate as well as the income requirements. And then you also have to, have an FBI background check. You have to have documents apostilled. You have to have, proof that you've paid for this full care or health insurance. So, the other visas that are available is student visa. I didn't really want to go back to school at my age, so I did go for a student visa. And what ended recently or will be ending recently, I've heard a couple of different things was
Golden.
what the Spanish called the golden visa. And that is if you invested 500,000 euros or more in Spanish real estate or in a Spanish company, then you could be granted a residency visa. And I'm not sure how long that would last. So with my digital nomad visa, because I applied while in Spain, once that gets approved, I my visa will last 3 years. If I were to apply in the United States for a digital nomad visa, once it's granted, it would be good. It would have to be renewed every year. So by applying once I arrived in Spain, that kind of took care of
Extends
renewing
it.
as frequently. So I'm hoping at the end of 3 years, when it comes time to renew, I can switch to the non-lucrative retirement visa. Other than that, there's nothing else that I've learned of that to be able to become a resident here unless you get hired by a Spanish company. And then usually it's because there is a need. You have a a qualified skill that is needed here in Spain, or you have a higher education degree that a company hires you. For instance, since I'm in the pharmaceutical business, I can say, if Bayer has a facility here in Spain and they need somebody to do the kind of work that I do, if I applied, Bayer could sponsor me for a residency visa and I have residency permit as long as I was working for Bayer. But then it's like a lot like the US and H-1B. I would have to stay with that company under that visa.
Right.
So that's that's if you're working and have that kind of job, the company can help you. But then if the company anything happens and you're not able to maintain your job there, if you lose your job and can't find another company to
You lose your visa.
continue your employment there, then you have to leave. So
Yeah.
it's hard if you're younger and have a family.
Yeah. It is difficult. What's the average time that it takes to get a visa? Do you know?
Well, you have to do a lot of preparation. So I started gathering documents for my visa and asking for like my FBI background check and for my diploma to be apostilled because that has to be done through the Department of State. So there's a lot of things that you have to do from a paperwork perspective. I started that process in January, late December, early January. I worked with a firm to help me get that everything, make sure I have everything collected and appropriately applied for. The application went in on April 1st. I had everything ready. And so it took me a couple months to get paperwork together. And then once having the paperwork together, then getting that submission and you have like everything gets attached to the application form and gets formally submitted to the Spanish government. So that application went in on April 1st. I heard a request, which was right before the end of the month. It was last week. I heard a request. They said, well, we want an updated bank statement because, this one was from the month before. It's like, well, of course, April wasn't done yet. It was April 1st.
Right.
So, they wanted a copy of my bank statement and my most recent income proof that, yes, I'm continuing to work and I still have income. So that went in Monday of this week. So, once again, things happen in less than 4 weeks for them to review and come back with the question. And then, I'm expecting within 3 weeks that, I'll either hear yay or nay.
Yeah.
I don't expect a problem because, once again, I've had a legal group assisting me with that and,
Yeah.
they haven't had any questions or concerns about anything that I provided to them.
Awesome. Okay. So, do you see yourself staying in Vigo long term or maybe moving around Spain?
I've I like Vigo. Every time I've come to Spain, I've visited Vigo, and that's why it kind of stuck on me. It's like I got to go check out the city and see what. And even when I did a hunting trip in Galicia, I drove around a lot of the outside area of Vigo. So I would like to stay in this metropolitan area. Yes. Is it as good and welcoming and open as the gay community that of any, when you go to the US, you go to like local bar, a gay bar, and you can find community quickly, and no matter what city you're in. Here, part of it is I did move to Vigo because it's a gay destination. And I moved here because it's very gay friendly, very accepting. And the culture here, being able to have access to, the symphony, seeing an opera, seeing an art gallery, as well as, good shopping, and then also being a train ride away from Madrid. If I want to, have the equivalent of a weekend in New York, I'm a 4 hour train ride away from Madrid. It's, just as much fun, much as much energy, just as entertaining.
Sure.
So staying here in Vigo, yeah, and culturally, it's become comfortable.
Great. Wonderful. So, did we discuss language a little bit before? Are you taking any courses
Not
currently?
formally. No,
Okay.
I had taken Spanish in high school and in college, learned by ear from family members. But one thing I do have to say is the community here for visitors they will try their best to help you out with English.
Yeah.
But for day-to-day living, you have to know some Spanish. You'd have to become comfortable. I know that there's some communities that have a lot of either American expats or British expats, particularly along the Mediterranean coast, where like, okay, yeah, they're all speaking English and they're got their own community. That's fine if it works for them culturally and it has their social groups and meets all their social and cultural needs. But in a place like Vigo, where you don't have those large pockets of people speaking English. There are a lot of people here that speak English, and there's a lot of people that want to learn English. There's English schools everywhere. I mean, if I really wanted to switch my visa and become and earn an income here, become a teacher as an English teacher, there's many opportunities. But I don't know if I could live off of that kind of wage of being an English teacher for English as a second language. If I needed to, I'd give it a try, but I don't need to at this point. But knowing the language and understanding it is I think it's important. It's also part of just respecting the people here.
Sure.
They want to be able to communicate with you.
Sure. And you're
The other
missing
thing
so
that,
much if you don't know.
yeah, the other thing is, Galicia has one of the five recognized languages in Spain. So, in Spain, Spanish or Castellano is recognized across the entire country in the Canary Islands. And like in Catalan in Barcelona, that's one of the recognized language, and Basque in Bilbao and the Basque region, Andalusian in Andalusia. Here in Galicia, it's called Gallego or Gallego, and it's its own variation of Spanish. It has a lot of elements of Portuguese, but it is its own unique language. So, I can recognize it when I hear it. When I see it in the newspaper, I can recognize it. I can understand it in print. Am I going to learn it? Probably not, because everybody
Mhm.
here knows Castellano.
Right.
But once again, the signage here is primarily in Gallego and then in Castellano. The newspapers are all in Spanish. Some of them have articles written in Gallego. Most of them have the opinion columns written in Gallego, and one of the local newspapers is all in Gallego. So, it's very much part of the culture here. They're very proud of it, and understandably so. It's got its lovely cuisine. It's got its lovely culture. I love the bagpipes. They're not quite the same as the northern neighbors in Ireland and Spain, but once again, the language is part of that.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So, in wrapping up, what advice would you give to someone in the LGBTQ community considering Vigo as a retirement destination?
Establish a social network quick if you come alone. And that's something that I've discovered. I came here a single person. I knew nobody in Vigo. I mean, I've met like the lady at the cafe that knows that I drink a cafe Americano every time I walk in. She says, "Hey,
Right.
Carino, how are you?" And there's a lot of that. A lot of the vendors, you establish that kind of rapport.
Right.
So there's three cafes, four cafe bars. They, I'll go there for lunch or dinner, and coffee or a wine or a beer, and they all know my preferences because that's the way it is here. But if you especially if you don't know the language really well and you're alone, you need to make sure you have a good social network initiated when you land. Because, I mean, there's a lot of things. Setting up your bills is unique here. Setting up your bank account, setting up everything, all your business transactions have a different flavor than in the US. It's not hard, it's a little bit more bureaucratic, but it's different. And
Mhm.
without knowing the language enough to understand, here's what you need to do, or here's what I'm asking you for, it becomes a burden that you really shouldn't have to deal with when you're in a new place like this. And
Right.
it's wonderful. I'm not saying it's perfect. There's, you know, there's a lot of things that as an American, I wish were different, but at the same time, that's what lends itself here. Like, for instance, because there's no tipping and people aren't ever in a hurry, I've waited 20 minutes to order a beer. In the United States, that's unconscionable.
Oh
But
yeah, people
here,
would be like yelling.
yeah, but here it's more like, yeah, I'll get you when I get you, and I know you're here.
Right.
But it's
It's
it's a
mañana.
different mindset. Yes,
Mañana.
it's a different mindset.
I understand. Yep, it's kind of comforting. So,
Yeah.
okay.
So I mean, that would be my recommendation: is that know somebody here or establish a social circle really quickly.
That's good advice. How about finally, if you can sum up Vigo in a few words for our listeners, what would they be?
If you like an easygoing Irish environment that's not Irish but Mediterranean, Vigo is your place. The misty winters without snow, the mild summer, the kilts and the bagpipes, the easygoingness of the people here, the fishing culture, the shanties that they sing in Ireland, they sing similar songs here, and it's part of the culture. So you have that, but you also have this very slow Mediterranean mindset of we're not in a hurry.
It sounds fascinating. It really
And you just
does.
got to take a deep breath and slow down.
Yeah. And that's what life's about. We tend to want to slow down. So, and I'm sure that's why you chose to live in Vigo. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you I learned a lot. I've never even really heard of Vigo as a place to live. And I am so glad that we met and you are able to enlighten us, our audience, on what life is like in Vigo, Spain.
Well, I want to say thank you for letting me share my story.
You're very welcome. And we'll see you soon.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you. Bye bye now.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast and consider making a donation by clicking the coffee cup on any page at www.wheredogaysretire.com. Each cup of coffee that you buy costs $5 and goes towards helping us continue the podcast. Thank you for your continued support.